Sorry about that, grade 6. My iPad screen went dark, so then I was worried it had stopped recording. So I guess this video is going to be in 2 parts, but that's okay. We stopped on page 6 right at the top. I'm going to start at the beginning of that paragraph again. Before us, the narrow, sun-splotched road wound like a lazy red serpent, dividing the high forest bank of quiet old trees on the left from the cotton field, forested by giant green and purple stalks, on the right. A barbed wire fence ran the length of the deep field, stretching eastward for over a quarter of a mile until it met the sloping green pasture that signaled the end of our family's 400 acres. An ancient oak tree up on the slope, visible even now, was the official dividing mark between Logan land and the beginning of a dense forest. Beyond the protective fencing of the forest, vast farming fields, worked by a multitude of sharecropping families, covered 2/3 of a 10-square-mile plantation. That was Harlan Granger land. So Harlan Granger is another character of this story. He is one of the white men who owns land. He owns a cotton plantation, and he has black families working on his land doing the farming for him. Remember that sharecropping that I talked about in the introductory video. Once our land had been Granger land too, but the Grangers had sold it during Reconstruction to a Yankee for tax money. In 1887, when the land was up for sale again, Grandpa had bought 200 acres of it, and in 1918, after the first 200 acres had been paid off, he had bought another 200. It was good, rich land, much of it still virgin forest, and there was no debt on half of it. But there was a mortgage on the 200 acres bought in 1918, and there were taxes on the full 400, and for the past 3 years there had not been enough money from the cotton to pay both and live on too. So what we've learned here is that the Logan family, they own their own land, okay? They are not like those sharecropping families who are basically working somebody else's land for them. The Logans have their own land. They just don't have all of it paid off yet. So when people make big purchases, like even today, if you were to buy a house, it's not likely that you're going to have all the money to pay for the whole house at once, because houses cost a lot of money. So what you end up doing is you put some money down, so you pay some of the price of the house, and then you get a mortgage on the rest of it. And that just means you slowly over the years pay for that large purchase. So that's what the Logans are doing with their land. They own some of it, but they're slowly paying for the rest of it. That was why Papa had gone to work on the railroad. In 1930, the price of cotton dropped. And so, in the spring of 1931, Papa set out looking for work, going as far north as Memphis and as far south as the Delta County. He had gone west too, into Louisiana. It was there he found work laying track for the railroad. He worked the remainder of the year away from us, not returning until the deep winter when the ground was cold and barren. The following spring, after planting was finished, he did the same. Now it was 1933, and Papa was again in Louisiana laying track. I asked him once why he had to go away, why the land was so important. He took my hand and said in his quiet way, "Look out there, Cassie girl. All that belongs to you. You ain't never had to live on nobody's place but your own, and as long as I live and the family survives, you'll never have to. That's important. You may not understand that now, but one day you will. Then you'll see." I looked at Papa strangely when he said that, for I knew that all the land did not belong to me. Some of it belonged to Stacy, Christopher John, and Little Man, not to mention the part that belonged to Big Ma, Mama, and Uncle Hammer, Papa's older brother who lived in Chicago. But Papa never divided the land in his mind. It was simply Logan land. For it, he would work the long, hot summer, pounding steel. Mama would teach and run the farm. Big Ma, in her 60s, would work like a woman of 20 in the fields and keep the house. And the boys and I would wear threadbare clothing, washed to dishwater color. But always, the taxes and the mortgage would be paid. Papa said that one day I would understand. I wondered. When the fields ended and the Granger forest fanned both sides of the road with long overhanging branches, a tall, emaciated-looking boy popped suddenly from a forest trail and swung a thin arm around Stacy. It was T.J. Avery. His younger brother Claude emerged a moment later, smiling weakly as if it pained him to do so. Neither boy had on shoes, and their Sunday clothing, patched and worn, hung loosely upon their frail frames. The Avery family sharecropped on Granger land. "Well," said TJ, jauntily swinging into step with Stacy, "here we go again, starting another school year." "Yeah," sighed Stacy. "Aw, man, don't look so down," TJ said cheerfully. "Your mama's really one great teacher. I should know." He certainly should. He had failed Mama's class last year and was now returning for a second try. "Shoot, you can say that," exclaimed Stacy. "You don't have to spend all day in a classroom with your mama." "Look on the bright side," said TJ. "Just think of the advantage you've got. You'll be learning all sorts of stuff for the rest of us." He smiled slyly. "Like what's on all them tests." Stacy thrust TJ's arm from his shoulders. "If that's what you think, you don't know Mama." "Ain't no need getting mad," TJ replied, undaunted. "Just an idea." He was quiet for a moment, then announced, "I betcha I could give y'all an earful about that burning last night." "Burning? What burning?" asked Stacy. "Man, don't y'all know nothing? The berries burning. I thought y'all's grandmother went over there last night to see about 'em." Of course, we knew that Big Ma had gone to a sick house last night. She was good at medicines, and people often called her instead of a doctor when they were sick. But we didn't know anything about any burnings, and I certainly didn't know anything about any berries either. All right, so we've learned a few things so far. We've learned that Mama is a teacher at the school. Stacy's upset to go to school, especially upset because he's in Mama's class. TJ and Claude Avery are friends of theirs, and they are a black family who share crops on Granger land. Now, what TJ is talking about is the burning of the berries. Now, notice that the word berries is capitalized. That means it's a last name. It seems maybe like a strange last name to us, but it is a last name. So he's telling us about some berries, so people who were burnt. And then what else did we learn? We learned, oh yes, that Big Ma is what these children call their grandmother. All right, let's jump back in. "What berries he talking about, Stacy?" I asked. "I don't know no berries." "They live way over on the other side of Smellings Creek. They come up to church sometimes," said Stacy absently. Then he turned back to TJ. "Mr. Lanier come by real late and got Big Ma. Said Mr. Barry was low sick and needed her to help nurse him. But he ain't said nothing about no burning." "He's low sick all right, 'cause he got burnt near to death. Him and his 2 nephews. And you know who done it?" "Who?" Stacy and I asked together. "Well, since y'all don't seem to know nothing," said TJ, in his usual sickening way of nursing a tidbit of information to death, "maybe I ought not tell y'all. It might hurt y'all's little ears." "Ah, boy," I said, "don't start that mess again." I didn't like TJ very much, and his stalling around didn't help. "Come on, TJ," said Stacy, "out with it." "Well," TJ murmured, then grew silent, as if considering whether or not he should talk. We reached the first of 2 crossroads and turned north. Another mile and we would approach the second crossroads and turn east again. Finally, TJ said, "Okay. See, them berries burnin' wasn't no accident. Some white men took a match to 'em." You mean just lit him up like a piece of wood? Stammered Christopher John, his eyes growing big with disbelief. But why? Asked Stacy. TJ shrugged. Don't know why. Just know they done it, that's all. How you know? I questioned suspiciously. He smiled smugly. 'Cause your mama come down on her way to school and talked to my mom about it. She did? Yeah, and you should have seen the way she looked when she come out of that house. How'd she look? Inquired Little Man, interested enough to glance up from the road for the first time. TJ looked around grimly and whispered, like death. He waited a moment for his words to be appropriately shocking, but the effect was spoiled by Little Man, who asked lightly, What does death look like? TJ turned in annoyance. Don't he know nothing? Well, what does it look like? Little Man demanded to know. He didn't like TJ either. Like my grandfather looked just 'fore they buried him, TJ described all-knowingly. Oh, replied Little Man, losing interest and concentrating on the road again. I tell you, Stacy, man, said TJ morosely, shaking his head, sometimes I just don't know about that family of yours. Stacy pulled back, considering whether or not TJ's words were offensive. But TJ immediately erased the question by continuing amiably. Don't get me wrong, Stacy. They some real swell kids. But that Cassie about got me whipped this morning. Good, I said. Now how'd she do that? Stacy laughed. You wouldn't be laughing if it had have happened to you. She up and told your mama about me going up to that Wallace store dancing room. And Miss Logan told mama. He eyed me disdainfully, then went on. But don't worry. I got out of it, though. When Mama asked me about it, I just said old Claude was always sneaking up there to get some of that free candy Mr. Caleb give out sometimes, and I had to go and get him, because I know good and well she didn't want us up there. Boy, did he get it, TJ laughed. Mom about wore him out. I stared at quiet Claude. You let him do that? I exclaimed. But Claude only smiled in that sickly way of his, and I knew that he had. He was more afraid of TJ than of his mother. Again, Little Man glanced up, and I could see his dislike for TJ growing. Friendly Christopher John glared at TJ, and putting his short arm around Claude's shoulder, said, Come on, Claude, let's go on ahead. Then he and Claude hurried up the road, away from TJ. Stacy, who generally overlooked TJ's underhanded stunts, shook his head. That was dirty. Well, what'd you expect me to do? I couldn't let her think I was going up there 'cause I like to, could I? She'd have killed me. And good riddance, I thought, promising myself that if he ever pulled anything like that on me, I'd knock his block off. We were nearing the second crossroads, where deep gullies lined both sides of the road, and the dense forest crept to the very edges of high, jagged clay-walled banks. Suddenly, Stacy turned. Quick, he cried, off the road. Without another word, all of us but Little Man scrambled up the steep right bank into the forest. Get up here, man, Stacy ordered. But Little Man only gazed at the ragged red bank, sparsely covered with scraggly brown briars, and kept on walking. Come on, do like I say. But I'll get my clothes dirty, protested Little Man. You're going to get them a whole lot dirtier you stay down there. Look. Little Man turned around and watched saucer-eyed as a bus bore down on him, spewing clouds of red dust like a huge yellow dragon breathing fire. Little Man headed toward the bank, but it was too steep. He ran frantically along the road looking for a foothold, and finding one, hopped onto the bank, but not before the bus had sped past, enveloping him in a scarlet haze, while laughing white faces pressed against the bus windows. Little Man shook a threatening fist into the thick air, then looked dismally down at himself. Well, old Little Man done got his Sunday clothes dirty. TJ laughed as we jumped down from the bank. Angry tears welled in Little Man's eyes, but he quickly brushed them away before TJ could see them. Ah, shut up, TJ, Stacy snapped. Yeah, shut up, TJ, I echoed. Come on, man, Stacy said, and next time, do like I tell ya. Little Man hopped down from the bank. How's come they did that, Stacy, huh? He asked, dusting himself off. How's come they didn't even stop for us? 'Cause they like to see us run, and it ain't our bus, Stacy said, balling his fists and jamming them tightly into his pockets. Well, where's our bus? Demanded Little Man. We ain't got one. Well, why not? Ask Mama, Stacy replied, as a tow-headed boy, barefooted and pale, came running down a forest path toward us. All right, so grade 6, I'm going to stop here. This is one of the examples of that segregation I was talking about, right, where there were laws that kept the white and the black people separate. So remember I said the phrase from that law was that things would be separate but equal. Here's an example of where they definitely are separate but not equal at all. The white children get a bus to take them to school, but the black children, they do not get a bus. They have to walk, okay? Let's keep going. Oh, and I should say here, we have a barefooted and pale boy. So this boy who's coming up, he is white as well. The boy quickly caught up and fell in stride with Stacy and TJ. Hey, Stacy, he said shyly. Hey, Jeremy, Stacy said. There was an awkward silence. Y'all just startin' school today? Yeah, replied Stacy. I wish ours was just startin', sighed Jeremy. Ours been going since the end of August. Jeremy's eyes were a whitewashed blue, and they seemed to weep when he spoke. Yeah, said Stacy again. So grade 6, here's another example of the inequality between the white and the black children. The white school starts at the end of August, so very end of August, close to the beginning of September, just like our school usually does. But now at this point in the book, it's October. And I don't know if you caught a little bit earlier, the reason that the black school starts later is because all of these black children are involved with the cotton harvest. So they don't go to school until after the harvest is done, which might sound nice to you. Maybe you would like to start school in October. But really what ends up happening is these children end up with less of an education, right? If you would go to school for fewer months, you wouldn't learn as much. So here's another example of the inequality between the white children and the black children. The white children are getting more schooling and more education. Jeremy kicked the dust briskly and looked toward the north. He was a strange boy. Ever since I had begun school, he had walked with us as far as the crossroads in the morning and met us there in the afternoon. He was often ridiculed or made fun of by the other children at his school, and had shown up more than once with wide red welts on his arms, which Lillian Jean, his older sister, had revealed with satisfaction were the result of his associating with us. Still, Jeremy continued to meet us. When we reached the crossroads, 3 more children, a girl of 12 or 13 and 2 boys, all looking very much like Jeremy, rushed past. The girl was Lillian Jean. Jeremy, come on, she said without a backward glance, and Jeremy, smiling sheepishly, waved a timid goodbye and slowly followed her. We stood in the crossing gazing after them. Jeremy looked back once, but then Lillian Jean yelled shrilly at him, and he did not look back again. They were headed for the Jefferson Davis County School, a long white wooden building looming in the distance. Behind the building was a wide sports field, around which were scattered rows of tiered, gray-looking benches. In front of it were 2 yellow buses, our own tormentor, and one that brought students from the other direction, and loitering students awaiting the knell of the morning bell. In the very center of the expansive front lawn, waving red, white, and blue, with the emblem of the Confederacy emblazoned in its upper left-hand corner, was the Mississippi flag. Directly below it was the American flag. As Jeremy and his sister and brothers hurried toward those transposed flags, we turned eastward, toward our own school. I'm just going to stop here because I have a couple of things to show you. This whole thing about the flags at the end. So if you look up at your screen here, at the top, we have the flag of Mississippi. That would have been the flag at this time at the 1930s. Actually, while I was looking for a picture of it, I found out that Mississippi changed its flag just this year. So this would have been the flag in the 1930s. And it talks about the red, white, and blue with the emblem of the Confederacy in the upper left-hand corner. So if you look in the upper left-hand corner of this flag, what that is a flag that was used by some of the southern states. So remember from the history, the southern states, they were the states that wanted to keep slavery. They wanted to keep the African American people enslaved. And it basically started a war because the northern states were saying it's not right for you to have slaves. You shouldn't have slavery. But the South, they really depended on the slaves to make profit, to make all the money that they were making, right? They were profiting on owning and treating other human beings very, very terribly. So what the southern states did was they basically said, if you're not going to let us have slaves, we're going to break away from the United States, which is why there's a gap in between here. And they had their own flags that represented those ideas, and this was one of those flags. So what that Confederate flag represents is really the idea that these southern states, they thought that slavery was good. They wanted to continue to have slavery. So the fact that the Mississippi flag still has that on there is representing that a lot of the people in Mississippi still believe that Black people are less than human, right? That slavery was all right and that it was actually a good thing, even though it's the exact opposite of a good thing, okay? And then also something to note as well, I don't have that on my picture, but they have in front of this white school, this flag is the flag that is at the top, okay? And when you put a flag at the top, it represents that it's the most important one. So what they've done is they've put their state flag on top of their country's flag. They've put it at the top because they think that it's representing that it's more important. So really, by having that at the top, they're saying these ideas that Black people are less than human, that slavery is okay, is more important even than our whole country. All right? And these are themes that we're going to keep going with as we continue. But I think that's enough for today. We're going to stop there because I don't know how long I've been going, a decent amount of time at least. And I'll make another video for you to listen to tomorrow to finish up the chapter. And then one last thing I want to say before I stop the recording is normally we get a lot of chances in class to discuss a lot of these things. If you have any questions for me, if you'd like to discuss it with me further, please contact me, please chat with me. I would love to have a chat with you about some of the things that we're talking about here. So make sure if you have any of those questions, you could even mark them down as you are listening to the video and then chat with me afterwards. So we'll continue chapter 1 tomorrow.